test sequence to avoid this problem in the future, and the rocket and payload remain in great health. So Falcon 9 rolled out to the pad with the Bangabandhu Satellite-1 payload on Wednesday evening at about 8 p.m. local time, and it went vertical yesterday at roughly 8 a.m. local time. Today we went through the launch director's go, no-go poll, held at about T-minus 2 hours. One of the several changes to Block 5 is in how we load propellants. We still use a liquid kerosene fuel called RP1, and our oxidizer is liquid oxygen. But instead of starting with our fuel load at T-minus 70 minutes, we begin loading both RP1 and liquid oxygen onto the first stage at T-minus 35 minutes. Those proceed in parallel until just a couple minutes before liftoff. We also start loading RP1 onto stage 2 at T-minus 35 minutes, but we let that complete and then add the liquid oxygen. That started at T-minus 16 minutes. So all told, that means that currently we're at about 95% full of fuel in stage 1 and 100% full in stage 2, with liquid oxygen being at 90% in stage 1 and about 60% in stage 2. So as we've mentioned before, we're also planning on recovering Falcon 9's first stage on, of course I Still Love You, 340 nautical miles southeast of Kennedy Space Center. And we're hoping to bring you live coverage of stage 1 during its descent. Otherwise, vehicle's healthy, payload is healthy, the range is a go, and though we're watching some strong upper altitude winds and some thick cloud layers, there's nothing stopping us on the weather front from launching today.
Block 5 refers to a series of upgrades that we've made to Falcon 9 as part of our ongoing effort to make spaceflight more like commercial air travel is today. This version of Falcon 9 you can see on your screen is designed for 10 or more flights with very limited refurbishment, but should be capable of additional flights with further testing and possible additional refurbishment. Some of the changes are actually very visible in this rocket, most notably the inner stage, this raceway cover down here, and the landing legs. All of these parts used to be white, but now they're black, which is the natural color of our improved thermal protection material, which doesn't require painting like the cork that we previously used. It's highly flame resistant and also holds up better to the elements. In particular, it's hydrophobic, meaning that it repels water. In addition to these changes, we've also made changes to the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket right down here. The thrust of these Merlin 1D engines has increased from 176,000 pound force to 190,000 pound force at sea level, which represents approximately an 8% thrust increase. We've also changed the primary thrust structure that houses the engines, which we call the octaweb down here, from a welded aluminum structure to a bolted structure. This greatly reduces the manufacturing and inspection burden and increases reliability and shortens the lead time towards production. Additional improvements have been made to the landing legs to support rapid post-landing vehicle recovery, and we've also upgraded the operational capability of components across the board. The ultimate goal of all these improvements is to be capable of relaunching a flown booster within 24 hours with minimal refurbishment. That doesn't mean that we want to fly a rocket once per day, but it means that we could if we needed to. Now at the top of this rocket is the nose cone structure at the very top. This is called the payload fairing, inside which is Bangabandhu Satellite-1, the first Bangladeshi geostationary communication satellite for the country of Bangladesh. The satellite was built by Thales Alenia Space of France and covers a wide variety of broadcast and telecommunication applications, including satellite television, internet access, and emergency communication services, and of course much more. The satellite will be operated by the Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Commission, or BTRC, and is expected to last approximately 15 years on orbit. Bangabandhu Satellite-1 will stay protected inside that fairing all the way up until about 3.5 minutes into flight. The fairing protects the satellite on ascent, but once we escape Earth's atmosphere, it's no longer needed and we pop it off. We are not attempting to recover this fairing on today's mission, but it's something that we'll look forward to do in future missions. So with just about 5 minutes or 6 minutes left in the countdown, let's check in with Michael on how the rocket is doing.
We're now just inside of T-minus 6 minutes, and stage 1 and stage 2 are both almost fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. At this point, both stages are just about 100% of fuel. Stage 1 is at 99% liquid oxygen and at 90% for stage 2. We'll continue topping off both stages until about T-minus 2 minutes to keep the propellants as cold and therefore as dense as possible in order to fit as much propellant onto the vehicle as we can. Around the T-minus 7 minute mark, we began our engine chill procedure. The propellants are much colder than the engines, and so it's important to get the engines to the correct temperature beforehand by slowly flowing propellant through them. Liquid oxygen in particular is so much colder that it would turn into a gas upon first contact, which would be a pretty hard start for the engine. The strongback cradle is opening and will slightly retract away from the rocket. The strongback is the structure that's standing immediately next to Falcon 9 on your screen, not the larger gray structure. It will recline more fully as Falcon 9 leaves the pad. And you heard the strongback lower has begun. At T-minus 3 minutes, we'll be performing an engine wiggle. That's checking the thrust vector control system to make sure that the Merlin engines will be able to properly steer Falcon 9 during ascent. And at T-minus 60 seconds, you'll hear that Falcon 9 is in startup, which means that the rocket's internal flight computers have taken over the countdown. And you can see the cradle is opening and is just finished opening on your screen there. The little arm is just beneath the fairing. One more interesting change for this mission relates to the Merlin engines themselves. In Block 4, the engines were used with a constant chamber pressure. Because engine thrust depends on both the chamber pressure and external atmospheric pressure, the Block 4 engine's thrust would slowly increase by up to 10 or 15,000 pounds per engine during ascent. For Block 5, we'll be maintaining a constant thrust of 190,000 pounds until cutoff, which means we'll actually be slowly decreasing the engine's chamber pressures over time to compensate for decreasing atmospheric pressure.
And stage 1 launch load is closed out.
Otherwise, the drone ship is on standby in the Atlantic Ocean. The payload is healthy and go for launch. The range is also go for launch. And at this point, we're inside of T-minus 3 minutes and getting pretty close to T0.
Strongback lower is ended. Strongback's at 88.2 degrees.
So let's listen in to the last couple minutes of terminal count.
Stage 2 LOX loads closed out. And Falcon 9's on internal power. Gas closeouts.
AFTS is ready for launch.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
LD go for launch.
Minus 15 seconds.
Falcon 9 is at flight pressures.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff.
Power telemetry nominal.
And you saw Falcon 9 lift off in a beautifully clear shot there at 4:14 p.m. Eastern. At T plus 10 seconds, the thrust vector control system
Vehicle is supersonic.
tilted Falcon to begin a pitch kick maneuver to get it going sideways. You just heard that we're going supersonic, and we're about to go through max Q when the rocket's pushing hardest against the atmosphere.
Vehicle is experiencing maximum dynamic pressure.
We've successfully achieved that major milestone of every rocket launch. We're actually decreasing the thrust in our engines a little bit around the time of max Q to minimize some of those forces. Coming up about 50 seconds from now,
Head back engine chill.
there will be 3 events in quick succession. The main engines will cut off, the 2 stages will separate, and the second stage will start its Merlin vacuum engine, which you heard is just beginning its own chill procedure. Cutoff happening just a few seconds from now.
Pico.
And there you saw those events occurring just as planned. You can even see some of the flicker from Merlin vacuum engine plume as it flicker in the cameras as that plume sort of interacted with the top of the interstage there for a moment. The next major event is the fairing deploy coming up just a few seconds from now. That's the second stage that will be deploying its fairing.
Vehicle is on nominal trajectory.
And there you see the fairings following away behind. They're light, they're made of carbon fiber and aluminum honeycomb, but they still represent excess mass, so we no longer need them once we get out of the atmosphere.
Acquisition of signal Bermuda.
For those of you just joining us, we had 3 events in rapid succession. We had a main engine cutoff from that first stage, we had a stage separation event, and then we had a second stage light, followed quickly then by a fairing separation. Everything's going great right now. Falcon 9 is looking pretty good. Right now, let's go over what we can see on your screen. On the left-hand side, that's a camera mounted on the top of the first stage of the rocket, looking down towards the 9 Merlin engines at the bottom. In that view, you can see those titanium grid fins. They slowly deployed just after stage separation. And those grid fins will allow the Falcon 9 first stage to guide itself back down towards the drone ship. Of course, I still love you. You can see brief flashes of those cold gas thrusters as they guide, provide additional control authority for that first stage. On the right-hand side of your screen is a camera mounted at the very bottom of the second stage, looking down towards the Merlin vacuum nozzle. Of course, at the very other end of that stage is the Bangabandhu Satellite-1. Right now, that Merlin vacuum engine is glowing red hot with those exhaust gases as it propels Bangabandhu Satellite-1 into its final geostationary transfer orbit. Our Falcon 9 first stage today is going to perform 2 burn maneuvers in order to get back down towards the drone ship. The first burn is going to be an entry burn coming up in about 30 seconds. You'll be able to see that entry burn start on the left-hand side of your screen. As a reminder, those bursts of clouds coming out of the Falcon 9 first stage on the left are those cold gas thrusters that, in addition to the titanium grid fins, allow it to provide or to control itself as it comes back down through the atmosphere. There's the startup of the entry burn. At this point, the Falcon 9 first stage is actually only about 10% of the mass that it was on the pad, so it's actually pretty empty of fuel and liquid oxygen right now. So this entry burn is only going to last a few more seconds before cutting off. And there it is.
And stage 1 entry burn shutdown. Drone ship has OS.
As that first stage gets closer and closer to the surface of the Earth, we should be able to see features such as clouds, waves, and eventually the outline of our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. It looks like there may be some condensation forming on the inside of the camera, but we should get some good video. On the right-hand side of your screen, again, that second stage is still continuously propelling Bangabandhu Satellite-1 into orbit. Looks like we may have lost video from the cameras on that first stage momentarily. We'll see if we can get them back. One thing that is unique about this mission is that the second stage engine cutoff is going to happen just before the landing, coming up in about 20 seconds or so. You can see in your mission status bar at the very bottom, the second stage engine cutoff and landing are right on top of each other, so be prepared for those 2 events to happen in quick succession.
Stage 1 landing by the start.
So it looks like we don't have a great video signal with that first stage right now, but we do have confirmation that the landing burn has started. Those landing legs should be deploying very soon. There it is. And after a brief interruption in the video signal, we are looking at the 25th recovered first stage of a Falcon 9 vehicle. What a great sight. That is a camera on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. The crowd's going nuts here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne. While all that was happening, we did have a successful second stage engine cutoff of that second stage carrying Bangabandhu Satellite-1. While we're all very excited here at SpaceX to recover our 25th booster, the primary mission is still to bring Bangabandhu Satellite-1 into geostationary transfer orbit. Right now, everything's looking good from that second stage. It's going to coast for about 17 minutes or so. We're not going to be with you for all of that. We're actually going to just look at a simulation of where that second stage is. However, we will come back in approximately 9 or 10 minutes to guide you through the rest of the satellite deployment.
Bermuda loss of signal expected.